Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I am delighted to have this opportunity to interview Melanie Smith, a master level coach who, having experienced much loss in her life, is passionate about helping people in their healing. Melanie coaches her clients in all areas of relationships, love, loss, business, health, finance, branding, and creativity as they teach her every day that anything is possible, providing living proof that through hard work and commitment, we can all grow, change, and succeed. Melanie started her career as a platinum-selling international songwriter and an award-winning actress. She has starred and co-starred in shows such as As the World Turns, Melrose Place, Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Deep Space Nine, and The Division, to name just a few. Her numerous accomplishments also include the development and management of an award-winning lifestyle, wellness, and yoga center, being a powerful motivational speaker, writer, and leader, being a contributing writer for many national health and wellness magazines, and she recently released a compassionate new book titled Unfinished Business: 8 Steps to Heal Your Trauma, Transcend Your Past, and Transform Your Life. Unfinished Business is a user-friendly guidebook for the heart that is infused with hard-won wisdom from Melanie's own experiences with grief, loss, and trauma. In it, she describes her 8-step actionable process that can help a person to overcome heartbreak, emotional wounds, limiting beliefs, old patterns, and unconscious habits, as well as the negative self-talk, self-judgment, overwhelm, and misalignment that holds people back from succeeding in love, relationships, business, finance, and health. I'm looking forward to talking with Melanie, who splits her time between Pennsylvania and Florida, about her personal struggles with grief, trauma, and heartache, why she considers grief and trauma to be a doorway to possibility and purpose, the way she guides her clients to shift their identity from the victim mindset to the student mindset, her new guidebook, Unfinished Business, and so much more for what is surely going to be an insightful, wisdom-filled, and inspiring interview with a remarkable person. Hey, Melanie, a warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Irene. Thank you.
Thank you, really, truly. So let's get it. So now that they know how amazing you are, let's start out from when you started out. So let's talk about your childhood, including how it took you from, I can't imagine you ever being a scrawny, sickly, small town kid, but
I was
to a successful performer, creator, and producer in the entertainment business for 30 years, to opening one of the most celebrated wellness centers in the nation. One thing we know about you is you're never idle.
No, I'm not.
Let's hear about the beginnings of Melanie.
So I was very, very skinny. And I was skinny because I was very sickly. You know, I had major surgery when I was 11 months old.
Wow.
Which was my first trauma. Being sick is traumatic as a child. But then I had surgery at 11 months old. And back then they didn't use anesthesia on babies. They used, yes, which only paralyzed you. It didn't anesthetize you. So I can actually remember my surgery. And then going in and out of hospital.
I can say at 11 months old, that's amazing just by itself.
Yes. And you and I chatted briefly about the fact that in the shock of that, leaving the body and being in a completely different realm, right? And whether that was, and we don't know for certain what any of it is, whether that was a death experience or an out of body experience, right? Changed the trajectory of my entire life. But then I was in and out of hospitals for 11 years. And which, look, that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? It was a challenging thing because my playground was basically the terminally ill section of the hospital for children. And the good news was I made so many friends because all these little kids were still kids, right? So we lean in towards play, we lean towards love, we lean towards connection. My mother said I used to, if I would see a little girl and I'd like see the dress that was like mine, I'd say same, matchy, you know, like I would just want to make connection. So I learned in that experience what it meant to make connections, the meaningful nature of being human. So there I was healing through the years, and I was different. You know, I was very skinny. I couldn't wear the clothes that the other kids wore. We know how.
If it's private, I completely respect it, not a problem. But can you talk about what that was wrong with you?
Yeah, eventration of the diaphragm. So I had a hole in my diaphragm, but my intestines had pushed their way up and actually pushed my heart into the section of my throat. So they had to go in and bring everything back down through the diaphragm, restation it, close the diaphragm, and hope that it stayed. Now, eventration of the diaphragm is not enormously uncommon, but this advanced and aggressive stage of it was because they were treating me for asthma for 11 months. And finally, my father said to my mother, if we don't get her to a better hospital, she'll die. Now, it gets worse. They take me to the hospital, CHOP in Philly, and they're prepping me for surgery, and they gave me salmonella poisoning.
My God.
So my parents, who had 5 other children, had to leave me in the hospital to go home and take care of my siblings because they didn't know when I'd recover from the salmonella. When I recovered from the salmonella and they called my parents and said I was going into surgery, that was the day Kennedy was assassinated. So nobody could travel. Roads were closed all over the country. I was left alone. And by the way, when they made the announcement about Kennedy, it was during As the World Turns, which was my first job. Okay, so.
Never any drama in your life.
No. I lived a soap opera. I was on a soap opera. So yeah, it was a very auspicious beginning. Let's just say that.
How many years of your life were you in terminal care until everything was obviously straightened out?
They finally told my parents at 11 years that I didn't have to come back to the hospital anymore. But for those 11 years, now let's talk about the mantraing in my life, which is one of the aspects of the book, is what are the mantras? One of my friends shared with me years later, and she said, it was so crazy going to your house and, you know, your parents and everyone always saying, treat her like she's normal, treat her like she's going to live. Right? That did a little bit of the opposite of what you thought it might have done. It made me incredibly physiologically ambitious. I became an athlete. I was always up a tree. I was a dancer. I was so in touch with my physiology, which of course now leads to my talents as a coach, right? And an energy reader, because I'm so alive and connected to my soma.
And it gave you such a passion to be alive.
Such a passion to be alive. Yes, absolutely.
Wow. How did you go from doing all of this in the entertainment business, which I guess you somehow fell into it or however that happened?
Entertainment business, that's a whole other story. That is a remarkable story how I got it. I never thought about being an actress ever in my whole life.
You didn't study for it. You didn't do any of that.
No, when I started on World Turns, I studied because I always say the universe doesn't necessarily pick the qualified, but it will always qualify who it picks. So once I got on World Turns, I went, holy, and I better go learn. And I did. I spent all my off hours studying the craft of acting. Now, let's stop here for a second, because why was I chosen? Was it to spend my life in the field of acting, or a couple of things? I used to say to my mom, I just want to live in Oakdale. So I did. But also, I got to spend years of my life embodying another traumatized person and surrounding myself with traumatized people. That is all that's on Daytime, correct? It's not my baby. It's not his baby. He left me. It's all this trauma and drama. And I learned, and as we know now through what's called psychodrama in the fields of philosophy, therapeutics, emotional therapy, and psychology, that is very much like psychodrama. Right? I got to act out the human emotion that was not mine. I got to live inside the experience of someone else in the realm, because the character of Emily was profoundly traumatized, profoundly. So that experience really got me in touch with a lot of things in my heart and soul and in my being. And then my mother came down with terminal cancer.
And that was like a huge turning point for you.
Huge.
And how did you segue from the entertainment business into opening a wellness center? And you didn't do it small. You didn't do a tiny little wellness center on a corner. You opened one of the most celebrated wellness centers in the nation. Nothing small about you.
And it was spectacular. This place was so beautiful. Well, I had been in the industry and had been very successful. I did incredible projects. I worked with amazing people. Interestingly enough, I probably turned down more roles than I took, but because I'm a firm believer that I didn't want to represent or be out in the world representing something that I thought could damage someone else's psychology. So, but I loved it. And yet, as I started experiencing more trauma, so now you look and you see, and I talk about this as well in the book, I saw my mother have her first stroke when I was 5. I then found her after she had a massive stroke at 11, and I had to get her to the hospital.
Wow.
And then
at 11, you had to get her to the hospital.
11, yes. And when the ambulance took her away, they forgot me. So I stood there until dark, not knowing if my mom was dead. She survived. Then she had breast cancer. Then she had the cancer that she died from. My father had a series of strokes, and he had lost 75% of his sight and about 70% of his hearing. So that was very hard on the family after, and then my mother dying, and then my sister was killed in a car crash.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And so as these things were happening, and I was noticing that something was going on in me internally that was very separate than what was going on intellectually in my mind. And I found that incredibly curious and decided that that was something I wanted to understand. And, it's funny, we spend so much of our life going, why am I here? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life, right? Well, first and foremost, we are here to understand ourselves, not just stand ourselves, right? Because how many of us are walking around on this planet tolerating ourselves, just standing ourselves? We're here to understand ourselves. What is in there? What is going on? What is my patterning? And through that dissecting and deep understanding of the self, we start to be able to make better choices for our life.
But the other thing that's striking me, and please correct me if you don't agree, but it seems to me that your childhood was your first exposure to unfinished business, because your mother and your father being so sick, they had to have tremendous unfinished business to offset all of these issues.
Well, my grandfather...
What's the word I'm looking for to trigger all of these issues?
Well, my grandfather, my father's father, killed himself.
There you go.
My father found him hanging.
Oh.
And my mother's mother died when she was 5. And then her father, who was a diabetic amputee and very, very wealthy, used her and her sister to he used my mother because she was so beautiful, to take to court when he was being sued for taxes, etc. And her other sister, who was not beautiful, basically he abandoned her and did not. So my mother had to struggle with half the time she was with her father in this mansion, who was very wealthy. And then on the weekends, she would live with her aunt and her cousins in this tiny apartment, feeling guilty about going back.
Survivor's guilt about her sister.
What's that?
She had survivor's guilt about her sister.
Right. So you have all of these things that were tamped down in my parents' existence, and they lived a profoundly traumatic life. I even say that in the dedication of my book. You know, I dedicate this to all the traumas that you've survived and the love you were determined to give regardless, right?
Right.
So, you know, this is not unusual because generational trauma is all pervasive in all countries. It's not just this country. Look how traumatized everyone is in the Ukraine right now. There's just so much trauma all around the world.
I think that trauma is part of the reason that we're having all these problems in the world. It's all unhealed.
It's 100%. Look, if we can't rest in a place of neutral inside of our own being, if we are constantly searching for something that has nothing to do with peace of mind, how can we have a world without chaos? People are searching for the wrong things. And I will tell you, the first poem I ever wrote in the 3rd grade, I wish I actually brought it down here. It's still in my handwriting. And it says, "The world is not a prison house. It is nothing but a spiritual kindergarten where a group of bewildered infants are trying to spell God with the wrong blocks."
First of all, I have to say how amazing that was that you were so profoundly introspective in 3rd grade. And second of all, I read that in your book and it blew me away. I was almost going to put it in the interview, and I said, there's so much to talk to her about. I'm not going to include that, but now you have. So I'm really glad. And then I want to tell everyone, if they're not blown away enough, so you lost your mother and your sister within 4 years, another sister later on, you overcame divorce, financial restructuring, and walking away from not one, but 2 major careers in your life. How did you do all this? Was it a constant healing, turning to different modalities? You had to be in the depths of despair plenty of times.
You know, despair is a very interesting concept to me. For some reason, I've never believed in suffering. I just never believed in it. So have I felt sorrow? Absolutely. Have I been exhausted by heartbreak? Absolutely. Have I felt insurmountable anxiety? Yes.
How did you surmount the insurmountable anxiety which so many other people also experience?
I went in, not out, right? So I didn't go to the places that we're taught to go, which is seek out attention, support, medication, self-medication. I went, what's happening in me? What is going on in my system? Where is it landing in my body? What is trapped? Now, I'm not saying everyone can do this. This is part of my purpose. This is part of my curriculum.
That's the insight you got from the times you were so sick as a child. So that's how you were able to tune in that way. That actually gave you a gift.
Yes, and I even say in the book, I do believe that children who are traumatized early get a sort of crack in the universe where we are looking, we start to look from why me to why me? Why me? What am I supposed to, what's the torch I'm meant to carry?
Right.
Because it doesn't seem reasonable. And I don't know why I logicked this, but it didn't seem reasonable that so much should happen to one person that wasn't meant to be used. My father had a philosophy You say, Melanie, nothing ever goes to waste, right? And whether that was a piece of chicken on a plate, or whether that was a lesson that you learned, or, when I went through my divorce, my father said to me something so simple. He just said, keep your eye on the sparrow.
Keep your eye on the sparrow.
Yes, which is a spiritual way of saying, look up to the light.
That's beautiful.
Right? Just follow that.
I think that near-death experience instilled with you with a lot of wisdom also at that very
Absolutely.
young age, and lit something in you that prepared you for what you're doing now.
It gave me a tether of certainty. It made me know. I love using this example. I don't know if anybody out there plays tennis. I'm not a good tennis player, but I played it. I'm actually pretty embarrassing. But what I do know is you can hit the ball over the net, right? But it feels different than when you hit the ball over the net by hitting the sweet spot. The vibration of the sweet spot is specific unto itself. I was born, or I should say reborn at 11 months, knowing the sweet spot of life. I knew what it meant to be connected to something greater in its purity. And that is always what I'm searching for, is to be connected. They've done a study on how many times we try to walk when we're infants. And I forget how many thousands of times we try. And that beautiful philosophy of we never give up, not because we don't feel defeated, but because we know what we're going for, right? We know what we're going for. That feeling inside of me taught me what I'm going for.
It sounds to me like in your coaching business, you help people to know what they're going for.
Absolutely. That's my mission.
Part, that they've been taught a certain mindset that this is what I should be going for, but it sounds like you connect them to who they really are and what they really need to be going for.
1000%. It's probably why, it's not probably why, it is why the people who come to me because, and I work with people from school teachers all the way to major global CEOs. And it's so funny because none of us are all that different.
No, we're all the same, basically.
I had a CEO come to me years ago who wanted to lose 65 pounds. And I have I also have a cert in nutrition. And I worked with him and he lost all the weight. And then he came into my office, really about to burst into tears. I said, what's happening? And he said, I thought I came to you to lose weight, but I came to you to be happy. And I don't know how to do that. But it's perfect metaphor, getting away from what we think is making us unhappy so that we can find what's truly making us unhappy is part of the key to the work of healing.
That's fabulous. And tell me why you describe grief as a constellation. I know you see it. I know you see all this grief and trauma as a doorway to all this possibility and purpose, but why? That's an unusual term. I've never heard grief described as a constellation.
So in my experience of working with thousands of people in grief, trauma, and heartache, what I notice is it never appears the same. So when you listen to like Elizabeth Kubler's work, right, the stages, and you see so much grief work that has that philosophy. I have never experienced that with any of my clients. Maybe one or two have come in with the data that they've adopted from that work, and she's done beautiful work. But I do think that before Elizabeth died, she also said, maybe not. Maybe this isn't so accurate.
Well, a lot of people say it's not as linear as it was presented.
It's not. Grief and loss and trauma is not at all linear. And because we are so different as energetic beings, constellations are more, and that's, by the way, you can see on the book cover, that's very much about the shattering of the energetic self, because the constellation moves around from the system it was naturally designed to be. So when we're traumatized, heartbroken, or we struggle with severe loss, which now we're starting to understand is just this amalgam of trauma, what we see is that the linear energy system, now we can look in Western sciences and we can look at the nervous system and the portals that are in, or the bundles that are in, that innervate into the spine and innervate the organs, right? They align perfectly with the energetic chakra system. When we look at those things, and that's complicated to think about, so we won't focus on that. But when we look at the way people present their symptoms of loss, it's always different and it shows up differently in the energetic system. So I do look at it as a real energetic constellation, and I can't address loss and trauma from an intellectual standpoint. I have to feel it from an energetic standpoint, and it is a constellation. It's not a line, it's not a circle, it's not nice and neat. Someone's shattering of center can blow a part of themselves all the way up here, all the way down here, and then cluster the rest in the center. I work with where the energy is stuck and where the energy has fled. Those are constellations. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So now I need to know about, I know the loss of your precious sister, Roseanne, led to a profound spiritual awakening for you. And because there's nothing colorful about you. And it brought you an important insight about the reason each one of us is here in this lifetime, including why you realized your true purpose was to become a master level coach. So you want to talk about the spiritual awakening to the important insight about our purpose to your purpose.
Oh, so my sister, the loss of my sister had its own form of magic, right?
I had just older, younger. I know you're one of 5.
Older. I'm the baby. I had spent the weekend with my sister at her home, and I will never forget this. She was walking around the room doing things, and I heard a voice say, "Pay attention to everything she does." And I watched everything she did. I didn't talk that much, and I'm a talker, and I didn't talk that much. I watched her hands. I watched her walk back and forth. I noticed her hair. I noticed her skin. I noticed her, all of that. We then drove into New York City together. She had to do some, she was the buyer for a beautiful gift shop.
Okay, I just got to ask her, were you used to hearing a voice in your head telling you, because my story is, of course, that I got these profound messages around the country.
I always hear voices.
So you always hear voices?
Always.
Wow, okay.
Always. I even talk about in the book when right before my mother died, a voice said, and I said it out loud, "This is the end of Mother's Day as we know it." My mother was dead 3 months later. So I just paid attention. Now we separate. I go back to Los Angeles, and she leaves a message on my answering machine that says, "Oh my God, I heard you got engaged," which I did. And I'm already picked out my dress. And my sister was really, really funny. She's like, "It's a size 4." And I'm laughing, and I thought, it's 11:30. I'll call her back tomorrow. So I had a meeting at, I think it was Paramount. No, it wasn't Paramount because I was on the other side. So it must have been at MTM. And I was leaving the meeting, and I get a call from my dad. Something's wrong. I call him back from a friend's house, and I find out that my sister died, was killed.
Was killed
in a car crash. She had dropped her daughter off and then went to pick up her son nearby. And somebody ran a stop sign. So I was devastated. I was devastated about this. We were so close. We looked almost exactly alike. We sounded exactly alike. She was just so
you're your sister, your role model, your everything.
Yes, we were. So after that happened, the beautiful, generous, may she rest in peace, late Angela Lansbury called me, and I had worked with Angela before, and she said, "Darling, I heard your sister died. Let's get you back to work. Let's keep you busy," which is, by the way, the biggest philosophy when I get busy, get busy, get busy. That's not the answer, but I was very grateful for the work. So as I was driving to the lot to film, I looked up, and there was a rainbow over the studio lot, but not just like a faint rainbow. It was like a Disney rainbow, right? And I pulled my car over and I started to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness.
It was joy.
It was, oh my God, you're coming to see me? And I sat with that rainbow and with my sister Roseanne, who, by the way, was called the Queen of Hearts. And I sat with that rainbow until it just faded away. And I felt such a sense of knowing, of this awareness around why do we make ourselves suffer and assume we know. We assume we know that because someone has left this earth, that that's a bad thing. We don't know that. We know we suffer, we miss them, we love them. My mother was my best friend, right? So making that assumption, and I used to say to my son all the time, you can always ask God questions, but you can never question God, period. Who are we to say we know better? We need to find in ourselves the profound awareness that we have to love fully now so we don't suffer and regret tomorrow.
Absolutely.
That's it.
That's it. I absolutely, it reminds me of the first message I got 2 months before my husband died in our car in an accident was typed into my head, Saul has to go. Many lessons will be learned from his death. Who are we to say?
Yeah.
I didn't have a choice in that.
Yeah, but you did have a choice in that. You had a choice in how you reacted to it, right?
It sustained me because I put it out of my mind. But when the accident happened and 2 more messages followed, I was like prepared and accepting.
So there is something at play we don't understand. There's a beautiful understanding of God will only give you what you would ask for if you knew everything God knew. God won't give you the things you ask for that are not worth you. They're not worthy of you. So we have to start trusting that there is meaning, that there is purpose. So when we start to look at belief systems, modeling, mantras, the bill of goods were sold. When I was watching my father die, which was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, it sounds counterintuitive to say that, but I had asked the hospice doctor, why this? Why did you go into hospice? They were the happiest group of doctors I'd ever seen in my life. It was like, you would think it was a carnival. I was like, what is up here? You people are like, you're like the Lollipop Guild. What is going on? And I said to the doctor, why this? Why did you choose this? And he said, what I've always found fascinating is people celebrate the whoosh of life that comes in, but they don't acknowledge the beauty of the whoosh of life that goes out. It's the same thing, different direction.
And it's returning home.
And again, we don't know. When you read Eben Alexander's book, Proof of Heaven,
mm-hmm. I've had him on the podcast.
You've had him?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it must have been so fascinating. I was reading that when my dad was dying, and I had the most incredible experience when my father was dying. So just understanding, having an openness, don't pretend to know for certain anything. Once we concretize the way we see life and we fall in love with a picture, we reduce the possibility of the true self to emerge.
That's true in a lot of people's lives. I see it all around me. Are concretized, and there's no peeking out of the box of that what they set for themselves. How did you realize your true purpose was to become a master level coach, and what did you do to get yourself so fabulous?
Well, I discovered my true purpose through resonance. I resonated in certain areas and I felt disconnected in others. So the more I found myself becoming successful in the entertainment industry, the less connected I felt to my purpose. And when I was
Did you know what your purpose was? You didn't know yet what your purpose was.
I didn't know yet, but I knew where I chose to spend more and more of my time. That is a divining rod to where you're meant to be, right? And as I kept pushing and pushing in the wrong direction, I felt not only less and less myself, but I felt physiologically ill. I was somaticized a lot of that disconnect. The more I went towards the things I was meant to embody in this lifetime, the more healing I experienced, the more joy I experienced, the more love I experienced, the more natural knowing I experienced. And so when I started to become highly fascinated with this stuff, I happen to be, I'm not an academic necessarily, but I am an intellectual. I love to consistently learn and I love information. It's like yum, yum, yum. I just can't get enough. If you ever talk to my fiance, he's like, I don't understand how you read all the time. And I just love it. I started not just looking for the highest level teachers in all of these fields, but they started finding me too. And I started studying and then apprenticing and traveling. And I started with yoga and meditation, went into chakra work and archetypes. I had already been a student of psychology and depth psychology. I studied bioenergetics. I went as far actually to study behavioral economics. So I could understand the play between what is our psychological behavior, because it's so many people coming to me around money issues and trauma, are inextricably linked. The people who can't make enough money and the people who can't stop making money, the people who only make money and don't make love, right? And I don't mean that just physiologically, but don't churn love in their life. They just make money and then they suffer and they struggle and they have heartache and they have loneliness and depression. And so that
and the
is
ones who maybe have the richer personal life, but they need to make more money or they need to be more successful, but they're stuck in that area also, right?
Yes. And what happens is, and I talk about this in the book about, and it's my own nomenclature. So charge changers. From a young age, when we first start needing to get away from ourselves and ourselves, and one of the things we know is early on, girls tend to be disembodied from their body, and young boys tend to be disembodied from their heart. So we as girls are taught to leave and abandon our body. It's not good enough. It's too skinny. It's too fat. We don't have boobs. We don't have tushies. We don't, whatever it is, right? They won't love me. They won't like me. I can't, from my physiological existence on the planet, I don't look like what they want. To where I was teased as a child. I was so skinny. I couldn't wear the clothes everybody else. So I got teased mercilessly. I mean, it was my sisters teased me. I would wear, they'd all wear those like cool little.
It's amazing you had the self-confidence to go into the entertainment industry, because that's all about what you look like.
Well, one of the things I believe is, I think my one sister told me every day how ugly I was. And I would walk up to the mirror in the bathroom and I'd go, you are not ugly. You are pretty enough. You are pretty enough. Right. And I would just give myself.
Why you were be beyond your years.
Don't listen to her. You're pretty enough. You're pretty enough to get a job. You're pretty enough to have a life, right? And I would do that balance with myself. But when you're teased like that and you create a charge changer, well, we reach outside ourselves to soothe ourselves, whether that's food, whether that's attention, get perfect grades, have perfect hair, make people laugh, start to do drugs, start to drink, whatever it is, we move the charge. What is the charge? The charge is the activation of unresolved energy in the system that create either an overcharge of or undercharge, that's depression, overcharge, anxiety, hypervigilance, physiological aggression, etc. Undercharged, depression, low level eating, slothfulness, inability to decide, inability to focus, right? Those are the two sides of the same coin.
Is passive aggressive behavior like a piece of this also?
Well, passive aggressive behavior.
And undercharged?
Well, passive aggressive behavior is the inability or the fear of expressing the self. But that's a learned behavior, because if you either learned that if you expressed yourself, you would get in trouble or abandoned, or it was modeled. So you'll see there are cultures that are passive aggressive. Oftentimes, you can literally find within cultures, you have Italians, right? I love my Italian friends. They just tell you, right? They just tell you like it is. I remember once I was at friends of his house. They were this loving couple. And when they'd fight, they would say this thing in Italian that was so aggressive. I don't even want to say what it means because it was actually like awful. And then 15 minutes later, they'd kiss and make up, right? That is aggressive. But then I have other friends, like my beautiful Irish Catholic friends, which my mother was, they're all passive aggressive. They won't just say it. They'll either say something under their breath, or they'll do something that lets you know that there's an unhappiness, right? These are beautiful, charming personality traits that we've come to love. And well, if you like comedy, you see how universal they are, right? But passive aggressive is the reduction of the self. And it's a punishing of the outside world because you don't have the strength to express who you are.
So fascinating. So fascinating. You're so wise. And then there's something else I want to ask you, but I don't want to run out of time for the rest of our interview. So I've got two other questions. I have a bunch more to ask you, but you talk about a 3-brain theory, and you also talk about an emotional hairball. What would you like to tell us about those?
So what I love about the 3-brain theory, which science is substantiating now, because what is a brain? A brain has to have an intrinsic nervous system, and a brain has to have neurons, and it has to be able to communicate. So the brain here, which I in the book call the royal brain, because it's in charge of everything, and we consult it all the time, which is a shame, actually, right? And the royal brain has, I believe it's 80 million neurons, what I call the real brain, which is relationship, emotion, affection, and love, right? What I call the real brain, which is the heart, that has 40,000 neurons. But the root brain, right, which is the gut, that has 100 million neurons. So really, the information in the gut is even more profound than what the brain parses out. So what happens is the royal brain never innervates down. The royal brain makes decisions here. It doesn't go like, what do you think, guys? But the root brain and the real brain are always innervating up to try to express something's going on. Now, we've learned how to not listen.
That's why a lot of people will be saying, listen to your gut, listen to your gut.
Listen to your gut. But you have to learn your gut, because sometimes the gut is wrong only because we haven't healed it. So the first brain that ever unfurled in our being is the root brain, right? So we have to start learning to go, what do you think? And I actually work with my clients on how to have what I call whole body listening and whole body communication. When I coach whole body. If you tell me something, if I was only my royal brain and you tell me something and I would go, oh, Irene, that's really interesting, and I did not embody this, I would buy your baloney, right? But because I'm listening whole body, I might go, really? Let me hear more about that. And I'll be watching your bioenergetics. I'd be watching where the charge is showing up in the body. Now, you ask me about the emotional hairball. Well, loss, grief, trauma, it's cumulative. And every time something happens to us, We tamp it down and we tamp it down and we tamp it down until as we get older, that emotional hairball cannot come up and out. That's why we start experiencing later in life when coping mechanisms don't work quite as well. That emotional hairball is what's creating depression, anxiety, illness, etc. We have pressed so many things down in our being that it's sizable and we don't know how to cope with it. What do we need to do for that? That's what the work in the book does, is we start to parse out every thread. Not only where did you learn it, how did you learn it, why did you learn it? But when we suffer a loss, we just think something as gross as my mom died, right? But my mom didn't just die. All my dreams with her died. My sense of safety in the world left. My best friend left. My role model of being a female left. Vision of my own success through making my mother happy left, right? My sense of trust left.
Could be my oasis left, my sense of.
Correct.
Right.
So we don't unpack each loss issue for what it is, which leaves tendrils of it inside of us. So you have to, and I go through loss categories in the book, and I encourage everyone to make their own loss categories, right? I lost my dad and I lost the money he owed me, right? That's your specific. So I lost a financial conduit. It doesn't all have to be dreamy and nice. You may have lost and suffer with an incomplete channel of emotion. I never got to say that. I want to be able to say that, right? And that's what I talk about even in the beginning of the book. Who would you be if you got to say everything that's left unsaid, right?
Big thing for me. That's what I talk to people about all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a very, 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 very simplistic thing, but in agreement with you. The night before my husband died, and I didn't know that the accident was happening the next day, he said to me, "I'm so lucky and thankful to have you in my life." I hold on to that. What if he had not said that? It gave me a sense of completion and it helped me to move on. But so many people don't hear that. So many people I've been at galleries where people are hysterical because they had a big fight with their father, their mother, or whatever it was the night before they unexpectedly died. And there's so much they didn't get to say.
And look, that right there is the opportunity to find meaning. It's an opportunity to know yourself better, not just, oh, next time I'll say the right thing, but who do I need to be to trust that the people around me know how loved they are, whether or not I say the words, right? God forbid anything happened to anybody in my life today. No one would leave not knowing how much I love them.
Right.
And not necessarily because I said to them the day before, oh, I love you so much, you are blank to me, but because I live it.
Right. You act love as a behavior.
Exactly.
You act love as behavior, which a lot of people don't do. It's just a verbal something, but they don't back it up with their actions. So on that beautiful note, I want to talk about, how about giving us an example of someone who had unfinished business and maybe they didn't complete it and how that ended, and someone you've known who's healed their unfinished business and how that ended up. Have you got a couple of succinct good examples or a few?
I'm going to give you a universal example.
Yeah, perfect.
Or what I like to call an archetypal example. Okay. Let's look at someone like Marilyn Monroe. And if anybody out there is too young to know who she is, I don't know what to say about that. Google her. Here was somebody who had profound trauma. Profound trauma.
For those who don't know, her profound trauma was?
She was in orphanages. She had a mother who was crazy. She was molested from a young age, and beautiful girl. So She went from the trauma of being totally unloved, or so she thought, to finding in her charge changer, through her sexuality, how to feel loved, the illusion of feeling loved. She built her life on that charge changer and on that, what I call in the book, ACT, right? Acceptance and approval creates tricks. She built this persona, this ACT out in the world. It did not have anything to do with her darkness and pain. She latched on to the goddess archetype in everything she did. She was a complete caricature. She was the epitome of the goddess archetype. She never healed her child. She never healed the victim in her. She never healed that part of herself that could have filled her up so much that as she got older, she could have dropped the goddess.
And gone to this fabulous second act or third
She
act.
could have gone to being a sage, a wise woman, one of the most legendary character actors. She didn't. So what did she do? She destroyed herself. She became an alcoholic and a drug addict, and eventually, we think, overdosed. And that is the deterioration of the self in service of the act. That's the deterioration of the soul in service of the ego. And until we parse that out and start dissecting what is really me, what is no longer something I need and I can let go of, so the fresh and the depth of my soul, the freshness of my spirit and soul can emerge and build a life for myself that may look like nothing else. Now, I will juxtaposition that. Had I not worked on my trauma, worked on my loss, and I kept going and fighting for a life that was serving my false self, I too may have ended up somewhere other than where I am today. Through healing my trauma and knowing my true self, really being able to merge with the truth and the original memory of who I am, my original purpose, my original depth of soul, I am literally one of the happiest people you'll ever meet. And you know the loss and trauma that I've been through. And I've been through even more than what I write about in the book. I thought people would go nuts if they heard it all.
But you do not carry. I think the difference is because you've healed and what you've done, which is definitely part of the mission of this podcast, is that you don't carry that trauma, that loss as your backpack to take with you everywhere in your life. You've healed it so you can drop it. That's why you're open. You can feel this joy.
I love what the Buddha says about the two arrows. The first arrow that hits us and wounds us, we can't control, right? Life throws arrows. The second arrow is our reaction, is our response to the first arrow. That's what we can control. We have to live life understanding how to control the second arrow. And that comes from healing.
Right. Okay, so that leads me right to your book. So in your book, Unfinished Business, 8 Steps to Heal Your Trauma, Transcend Your Past, and Transform Your Life, you guide your readers to clear out the heartbreak, trauma, and grief of their past, make space for joy, hope, and possibility, which we're talking about. You want to highlight some of those 8 actionable steps for us that you talk about? And what else would you like everyone to know about your book? Why should they go a whole rush and get it for themselves?
Well, first of all, I encourage you to get it because I want you all to live the best life possible. This work is lived through me. This wasn't just something I studied. I have been using this work on myself and my clients for over 2 decades, right? So in my own personal alchemical laboratory of my own soul, I have proven to myself and others that this work is not only actionable and doable, but it's repeatable for healing your spirit, your soul, and your past, right? So if we look at some of the steps to highlight, first, we want to unearth what has happened. What happened? So simple. What happened? You have to start to look at the truth of your past.
How many things happened? Because
how many things? You want to till the soil, as I say in the book. You want to start to understand what it is you believe in, the messages you consistently tell yourself, the behaviors you act out into the world. What are the silent mentors of your future? What did you learn in the past that literally guide you to the future that are not real? They're yours, they're real to you. We all have them, but they're actually not real. Okay. I had a client that came to me years ago. She and her husband fought all the time about how to clean dishes, and they were going to get a divorce over it. It was about the way they use sponges. And we came to the fact that the parents were so adamant that dirty people use a sponge this way and clean people use a sponge this way. And it was so beaten into her that it was like a source of life. But it's not true, right? So understanding what are the messages, what are the models, what are the patterns, what are the beliefs, what are the behaviors? Then we start to understand where trapped trauma is in the body, where loss has accumulated in the system. And the system constantly gives you hints. You will find the charge in the system tells you, when somebody says something and all of a sudden you can't think about anything else, I call them hot thoughts. That's charge. Now there's good charge. When you make out with a boy, that's like good charge. Or make out with a girl, that's good charge, right? When you see a movie you loved and you let it fill you up, that's good charge, and that's healthy charge. We want charge. It's the key to being alive. But misdirected and misguided charge is destructive. So we have to understand and start to learn how charge shows up in the body. I teach you how to read charge. I teach you how to find what you do when charge is active. What is it you do that makes you abandon yourself? Okay, you're going through an experience, you go instead of staying with the experience and drink, or you turn on TV and eat, etc., etc., etc. We have to learn to sit with what it is we're experiencing so the charge can complete. This is all Peter Levine's work, Bessel van der Kolk, etc., now Gabor Mate. This is about learning to let the charge come up and out of us so that it can complete and leave the system, right? So then we move on to, who do these charge issues belong to? Who is the person in our life or the people in our lives that have hurt us or activated this pain, created so much pain in our lives? And then we learn the process through transactional writing, how to let these things go. We then go to restructuring and reframing life, and then we go to the design of our future. Yeah.
And the design of our future, I'm sure when you work with people, sometimes the design of the future is totally different than when they came to you thinking.
Unbelievable. I have seen not only people go in a different direction, but become these profoundly powerful, impactful human beings on this earth. It's a complete 360. And then some people, it's just a shift, right? It's a shift that clicks them right into their sense of purpose and an accurate alignment, and their joy grows exponentially. Yeah.
That's fabulous. And I'm going to ask you also, you talk about, well, we're kind of touching on the fact that you call lifestyle our mission. And we're talking about the lifestyle that we create and how I guess you get people in a way to change their lifestyle by working with you, right? And you also talk about that it's important to heal at the soul level. What does that mean to you? For people who say soul level, for those who had a near-death experience and gotten to that soul level, how do they identify that?
So one of the things I talk about in the book, and a lot of people had my publisher, my editor, everybody, they had a little something to say about this. Like, do we keep it there? Do we stop people from going right into the work? Or, because I have a glossary of terms. Do you remember that in the book? And so I felt it was really important that people have a working definition of every term that I use. Not every, there's, I think, 6 or 8 terms that I define in that short glossary. And one of the reasons I decided to give a definition of the soul is because everybody has this assumption that everybody knows what soul is. But I feel like people love metaphor to really, I think metaphor helps us leap in learning. So one of the things I talk about in the book is, remember that time when you were young and you would go outside to play, or kids now, maybe you'd be on your game playing. I don't know, right? Maybe they don't go out as much, but you're in that space where all time disappears, where you don't even know that it's going to be dinner. We're outside in our generation, right? We're outside and we're on our bikes, or we're on the tree swing, or we're climbing up a tree, or we're in a fort, or whatever. We're playing, dodgeball. And then somebody yells, "It's dinner." And we're like, "What?" And you were out there for 6 hours and you thought you were there for 1 minute. Okay. That's your soul. That's being in flow. That's when you are cradled and couched in something that is just simply bigger than you. You are living your bliss. That is healing at a soul level. You want to chip away the layers that keep you from that level of beingness. And when you live at that beingness, nothing's impossible. Life is free.
Sounds like you're helping people to remove their mask.
Exactly. You live the wrong life if you're the wrong person. Right? It's like, you know what I mean? You live the wrong life if you're going into life as the wrong person. Let's get you to be the right person, and then your life will magically snap into place. I've seen it countless times.
Wow, that's amazing. Do people have to work with you for a very long time to get to that space? Or do sometimes the synapses come together very quickly?
I have had people work with me for 6 months. And I also have people who work with me on a lot of things. So because I also work with people to help them see their business, businesses are traumatized, right?
And businesses have souls.
The businesses have souls, absolutely. And I always try to make the distinction. People think businesses are this magic thing. And I go, no, it's just a building or 4 walls with a bunch of traumatized people trying to sell something, right?
Right.
So if we all healed, it would shift the way all of the chaos on the planet is dealt with.
I'm with you, sister.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, now that everybody would like to check out what it's like to work with you, do you have a special offer for members of our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience?
Oh my God, yes. So I would love, I have never offered an introductory session before. And I would love to offer a much lower price for that 1 hour session with me. I'm typically $500 an hour, but I would love to offer our viewers $175 for the hour. And then we can figure out a million things that you want to really unearth and heal. Yeah, I think that would be a great thing. And also with the book, I can help really guide you. We can go through it and really look at the system together.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And because I love to end with something about joy, and I know the work you do brings you great joy. What is gratitude for you, Melanie, have to do with finding joy, even in times of struggle? Can we really find joy when we're struggling and inundated in our swamps?
I wake up every day, no matter what's happening, and I plant my feet on the ground. And the first thing I say is, thank you for my perfect life, right? Thank you for my perfect life. And what do I believe about that sense of gratitude? Because everything in life is physics. And we resonate with the vibrations that we are, right? We don't get what we want, we get what we are. Have you ever seen a J trap under a sink?
Yeah.
Right? The water will never be uneven because it seeks its own level. So we vibrate what we draw to us, and we draw to us what we vibrate. So I really believe that as we live in gratitude, no matter what, gratitude draws to us what it is, which is grace. Gratitude is grace in action.
And you do this even when you're in struggle?
Even when I'm in struggle.
Because you know that there are other parts that you're grateful for, even though this part right now is something to be figured out.
Correct.
Would you say?
Correct. I mean, look, life is challenging for every one of us, but we can't withhold our love and our joy and our peace of mind and our inner well-being because things get hard sometimes. We have to live with the same amount of courage and the same amount of gratitude and the same amount of love when we're in the valleys as when we're on the peaks.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Could not be better spoken. Melanie, the mission of Grief and Rebirth podcast, which is to educate, enlighten, and present healing choices that can lead to transformation and rebirth, is so deeply in sync with this heartfelt, uplifting quote from your life-changing book, Unfinished Business, 8 Steps to Heal Your Trauma, Transcend Your Past, and Transform Your Life. I loved this quote. May you live your highest, most profoundly beautiful life. May you carry with you the wisdom and clarity required to navigate life's challenges and call your spirit and power back home. May the accumulation of unfinished business be a thing of your past. May you move forward in your life, knowing that no matter what the future holds, you will remain rooted, grounded, and empowered in the clean and nourished garden of your soul. Carry on, you beautiful gardeners and soldiers of the highest good. The light within me salutes the light within you, now and forever. Thank you from my heart, Melanie, for all you do to help people heal and evolve through your powerful and wise coaching, through Unfinished Business, which is your user-friendly guidebook with its actionable steps for emotional health and authentic well-being, and through this insightful and powerful interview that I know has inspired many in our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience on their healing journeys. And here is a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. As I like to say, to be continued. Thank you so much, Melanie.
And thank you for all the beautiful things you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And bye for now. Thank you.